Coming to you from Harris County Elections Office to provide you with our morning update. We have almost 500 of our 750 polling locations that have been tabulated. The remainder are being processed by our staff over here. Prior to the arrival of the materials at the Election Technology Center, election judges across the county brought their materials to 4 drop-off locations across the county, where the chain of custody and seals on those materials were verified, where our staff verified that the materials from the polling locations were all provided appropriately, and then those were put on trucks and brought to our central counting station. Our staff is currently processing the materials on the next step, and they are taking out the electronic media from the machines that scan the votes, and they're providing those materials to our central counting station, which is manned by both political parties. Want to set us all on the same page. We are having the first election in Harris County, the first major election and the first primary with paper ballots. And we know from across the country, that this is the best practice to have paper ballots voted by the voters as your backup material. And so what that means is it's a slower process. It requires election judges to do more with respect to having the ballots for the voters. It requires the voters to do more with respect to putting the paper in the machine, putting it then in the scan machine, and it requires more of our staff to verify that we have the ballot bag back with the paper in it and the machines themselves. And then we also have to verify the chain of custody for all of those materials. And so what we're looking at here is a slower but more accurate and more secure process. And so we are confident that these 250 outstanding locations will be processed by our staff, provided to Central Count, and tabulated appropriately. Do we know when? We are on track to be complete with the part that is processed by the Elections Administrator's Office by this afternoon or evening.
How many total ballot problems did you all have? Pairs, jams,
So total ballot problems, I'll push back a little bit there. We're working with paper here. What we know is we have hundreds of thousands of ballots processed accurately and securely and here in our central counting station. We are working with 2.5 million voters, right, registered voters in the county, and we're using paper. Some of the incidents that occur with paper are then looked at by our central counting station, which are, again, manned by both political parties. That is part of the process here, but it is not the majority by any means. And so we are working through the process with our central counting station to have those up on our website every hour on the hour.
So will that be counted later, or is that already been counted?
No, we are counting ballots as they come through and get provided to our central counting station. The central counting station, if they have to look at any of the ballots, they are working on that right now.
There was talk about an extension. Is that gonna be requested, or what was the miscommunication here with the Secretary of State and the county? Because Harris County is the biggest county in Texas.
That's right.
And now we're gonna go to court. People want to know.
So the political parties and the Elections Administrator's Office talked with the Secretary of State's office yesterday now, and the political parties were considering going to court asking for an extension. That was in conversation with the Secretary of State's office about what next steps might be. We are on track to have the Elections Administrator's part of this process complete by the statutory deadline of 7 p.m. That conversation was a seeking out of the Secretary of State's advice, because they are required under law to provide advice to counties and political parties engaging in an election. That was what that conversation was about. The political parties have not, to our knowledge, filed anything requesting that extension.
So have other counties had similar issues with these type of machines?
So it's a good question, because by 2026, every county in the state will have to use paper ballots, and will be processing their votes in the same manner that we are now. They'll have to have the paper ballot as well as the electronic media. So we have seen other counties in the state have take the same amount of time to accurately process their results, including their paper ballots.
And they had issues too. Do you know what counties?
So other counties that have paper ballots, I can tell you are, Tarrant, Dallas, Travis. I wouldn't say that any of them have had issues. They're working through paper ballots and the electronic media as appropriate.
So you mentioned that you guys will be finished by this afternoon, the 7 p.m. deadline, if you will.
That's
You'll be done by the 7 p.m. deadline. Will the counters be done by the 7 p.m. deadline?
So both political parties have brought in extra people to look at anything that they need to look at. And let's note, they review the reports that come out from the central counting's machines, and then they also look at anything else that needs to be looked at. And so they have brought in extra people to help them with that process.
Do you think they'll be done by 7?
That's a question for them, but we are on track to be complete.
Speaking of that, as of last night, and correct me if I'm wrong, so it was 20 Harris County election precincts had, is true or false, had no Republican judges, and 12 precincts had no Democratic judges out of the 375.
That sounds like the right numbers. And so to note that the polling locations, they decided to co-locate, meaning have in the same building their polling locations. And so the polling location had one or the other, and sometimes you had the Democratic judge would handle the Republican side of the polling location.
So just to be clear, each precinct had separate Republican and Democrat machines. So my question is, was the county, like the judge there, supposed to handle both if one didn't have enough staff?
So the political parties requested of their judges, where they only had one judge present with the other party judge not present, to basically run that other side poll. That by and large happened, but did not happen across the board.
What's your message to the fact that that didn't happen? And some voters complained that they were able to vote because a judge didn't want to step up and help for both parties.
So, I mean, it's an unfortunate circumstance. We are in a county where we were unfortunately not able to do a joint primary election. You'll see that other counties run their election on election day the same way that early voting is, where you can vote at any location and you can vote on the same machines as the other party. Election day in Harris County was run separately, and so you're left with the situation where you have to rely on the good graces of one judge potentially having to run the location for the other judge or the other party.
Are y'all looking to change that? It just seems like
We would love to run joint primary elections. It requires our office to agree to that, both political parties as well as Commissioner's Court to agree to that. And I think the trend is going that way, but we have not secured that yet.
Do you think that this has anything to do with the new law in Texas? This delay?
So SB 1 has increased staff time by enormous amounts. So talking about mail ballots related to SB 1, we know we have a new photo ID ID requirement on those applications as well as the ballots themselves. And so what we've seen is people that received letters from us and from the early voting ballot board indicating that there was a missing ID on their ballots. Then they go into the polling location and have to go through a whole process to cancel their mail ballot or potentially vote a provisional ballot. And that, of course, slows things down at the polling location.
So when the Secretary of State issued that press release last night, can you kind of talk to that? Were they misinformed, or did they jump the gun, or what was going on there in your opinion?
Look, it's unfortunate that they put out that press release. We had a conversation with the Secretary of State's office. They're required by law to provide advice to the counties, and that's what happened. And so we had a conversation with them about a potential next steps. It's up to the political parties to decide whether they want to seek an extension. They have not done so, to our knowledge, and the Secretary of State's office knows that we are on track to complete our processing and counting of the ballots, and so it really was a jump of the gun, and it's just unfortunate that that there was a negative attempt to make Harris County look bad at this moment, and it's completely unnecessary because we are processing the ballots as appropriate.
what's your message to voters about all this confusion between the back and forth?
That's a good question. So voters can be sure that the paper paper ballots and the electronic media that go with that is the most safe and secure ballot in the country. We know this. It's a best practice. And so that's the message to voters. It will take time. It takes longer time at the polling locations for them. It takes longer time for us to process. And it takes longer time for our central count to finally tabulate. But that is worth the effort of having the accuracy and security of their vote.
I have a question about just following up on that. Is this going to change any race at any point? This delay, voters want to know. Is this going to change someone that probably would have won last night? Anything?
So I'll push back a little bit on the word delay. We are processing as appropriate. This is how long it takes to process votes accurately. Will it change the outcome of a race? Votes as they come in could potentially change the outcome of a race. That could be from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock this morning. And so it remains to be seen. We will post those results on harrisvotes.com about every hour on the hour, and then voters can follow that closely.
Reading between the lines there a little bit, do you think that there's partisan politics at play here? Because Lieutenant Dan Patrick's office was quick to jump on Harris County saying this was an absolute failure. And really saw the Republican Party kind of attack this office. So I'm wondering, I hate to say that now this election's political, but can you weigh in on that? Because it seems this is a very political conversation.
Sure. Look, the Office of Elections Administrator is by law nonpartisan, and we maintain that very strictly. It is unfortunate when we come in the crosshairs of any political party seeking to undermine the office or the election itself. There is no need for that. We are processing the votes as accurately and securely as we are able to, using best practices. And so it is unfortunate that one political party took this in a direction that it honestly should not have taken.
You think about the election workers who've been here, right, working to get these votes in. What do you think the Secretary of State's message to them says?
Look, the Secretary of State's office put out the press release. They jumped the gun. I hope that their message to our staff who have been working extremely long hours, up to 20 hours a day for the last few weeks, the message to them should be, we trust you. We know that you are putting the effort in here, and this is the same message that should be going to the judges working the polling locations. Look, we know that it takes time. We know that you're working your tail off to get us the votes accurately and securely, and we trust you to do that well.
So if your office knew that paper ballots were going to cause delays, why not let the public know about that in advance?
It's a good question. So again, not that this is a delay. We are processing the votes as they've been processed, and we can go back and look at years past. It takes time to count the votes. And so we would just let voters know that we are putting those votes out and those tallies out as they come in, and we will continue to do that until we're done with the count.
I have a question.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
Isabel Longoria said last night that it was a typical election in Harris County. Do you guys stand by those comments?
Yeah, I mean, it's a typical election with the new rules we're operating under SB 1 and the new paper system that we have. And so those together, yes, I would agree with that statement.
Is this the biggest election we've done with the paper ballots so far?
That's correct. This is the first major election in Harris County with the paper ballots, and of course the first primary election. Yes.
So I guess the concern that people have when we hear this, whether it's political or not political, is this going to happen in November? Are we going to see the results in November accurately, on time, or we're going to go back to the same thing and probably weeks are going to pass and maybe the court thing is going to happen in November? Is it going to happen?
So I think for November, we can look forward to working with both political parties in the county, working with Commissioner's Court to do this and do it even better. We can work on, we had 4 drop-off locations across the county. Of course, that takes time to bring it into our central count. We had, last November, we had 1 drop-off location at central count. The thing we'll look for this coming November is what are best practices from this election and what lessons can we learn and make sure that we're implementing those for November. I will remind everyone that the early voting results, with the ballot by mail included, were put out just after 7 o'clock. So those were timely, and we've been updating those with the election records almost every hour since then.
Was there a delay in getting equipment to the polls and then getting that equipment back overnight?
No delays. The judges have to follow the chain of custody, they have a lot of paperwork that they have to do by law to make sure that they are reconciling the voters that have come in with the votes that they are going to pass off to us. And so there are steps there that make sure that the information we get back is secure, accurate, and can be timely, right? And so it's not a delay, it is them processing appropriately and then getting that to us where we then process appropriately.
Lastly, how concerned are you that all of this that's going on is damaging the reputation of all of you currently?
Look, what I would implore folks to remember is this is public service. We are run by public servants trying to do a good job for the voters. And that is the primary goal, is to make sure that voters are able to vote and cast their ballot, and that we are able to count those votes. And that is the bottom line. And so I hope voters will understand that moving to a system that is more safe, more secure, more accurate takes time, and that we will do everything in our power to make sure that it is done properly, securely, and counted quickly.
Question from my investigative reporter: what grade did you give the office for after this election?
What letter grade would we give the office? Let's say I'm calculating. I would give our office a B+.
And also, Isabel Longoria mentioned something about practical jokes last night, that maybe Democrats were still in ballot boxes, or Republicans or something. She brought it up, and then it was kind of like confusing after that. Do you have any documented cases of that, or maybe are you clear? Or
I might have. That might have been during the time I was taking my nap. I don't know anything about any practical jokes. Yeah.
When it comes to the actual counting of the votes, is that the county process, or is that the Republican or Democratic Party?
So it's a joint process. Our staff is in central count with both political parties, and the parties oversee our staff reading the electronic media into the central counting station, where we then produce a report that is reviewed by both parties.
In the event of a recount, how does this help, the paper ballot system help or recount?
So a recount with a paper ballot system is done by recounting the paper ballots. So as opposed to our old machines where there was no paper backup, this is a fully, you see the vote that the voter voted, and that is what is recounted if a recounted is requested or ordered by a court.
Which would move that quicker than the older system? Is that a benefit that the paper system has?
So the benefit that the paper system has is it's extremely accurate because you have the voter's vote sitting in front of you. It is not necessarily a quicker process, right? Because you are turning pages, literally turning pages and counting votes from there. But we know it is more accurate because you're physically holding that voter's vote.
You talk a lot about the smudging and the pushing of the at the machines by the voters. Mm-hmm. Is that something that maybe voters need to watch out in the future as to how they handle those paper receipts? And also, are y'all going to change any of that?
Sure. I mean, there's always a learning curve when you're moving to a new voting system, and paper ballots are new in Texas. We've been voting on, at least in Harris County, on machines with no paper ballots for almost 20 years. And so the move for voters to a paper system is going to take a learning process. We are committed to training our judges, our clerks, to be able to educate voters as they come in to make that less likely, right? The other thing here is we have 2 pages of paper ballots in Harris County. We're the only ones in the entire state that have that. And so we are committed, again, to making sure that voters both understand that 2 pages is required and how to engage with the machines when using those ballots.
Just use it off the top. I missed the number. How many? Where are we as far as percentage-wise of counting?
Sure, almost 500 out of 750 locations. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can you just explain the process of going from the unofficial ballot
Yes. Yes. So we are currently engaging in the unofficial vote tally, and we will do so up until what is called the canvass deadline. And the canvass deadline is set by law, and it is March 10th. That is when the parties will certify the final results of all the votes that have been cast. Up until that point, all of these tallies are the unofficial results, and so you'll see that noted on every report that we put out. Each one is adding to those numbers, but they are the unofficial results. A couple of things happen after we're done counting these election day. We go through provisional votes. Those are counted. The outstanding mail ballots that have come in from overseas voters, military voters, those are still processed and reconciled before the final tally is done.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you.